Planning Committee, 4th of December, starts at 10 a.m. Testing sound.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Councillor Smart and I'm the chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome you all to Cambridge City Council's Planning Committee meeting taking place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday the 4th of December. So members can introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Bajan.
Councillor Bajan, Labour Party representative for Romsey.
Councillor Nestor, Labour Party representative for Castlewood.
So just to be clear, we don't need to say our political affiliations, just names, that'll do.
Councillor Tim Griffin.
Councillor Alice Gilderdale.
Councillor Dryden, Cherrington Ward.
Councillor Katie Porry, Market Ward.
Councillor Nigel Ogmatoy, Trumpington.
Councillor Matthew Howard, Abbey, standing in for Naomi Bennett.
Thank you, councillors. So apologies are received from councillors Bennett and Thornborough.
And Todd Jones.
And no, Todd Jones is a reserve anyway, isn't he? No. Oh, so, and Michael and Councillor Todd Jones. Officers permanently disabled for the meeting are Delivery Manager Toby Williams, Legal Advisor Keith Barber, Committee Manager Sarah Steed, Producer Claire Tunnicliffe. Other officers and public speakers will join us throughout the course of the meeting and I will introduce them at start relevant agenda items. Housekeeping, if anyone has any problems hearing me throughout the meeting, please alert me by waving your hand or advising a council officer. We aim to take a 45-minute lunch break between noon and 2 p.m. The process for each planning application will be the case officer will give a brief introduction to his or her report. Registered public speakers will be invited to have their say. There will be 3 minutes to those speaking in support and 3 minutes to those speaking against unless advised otherwise. The committee manager will ring a bell when you have 30 seconds remaining. Once public speakers have addressed the committee, their speaking time is over. Public speakers are unable to join in with the councillor debate. The committee will then discuss and debate the item and may ask questions of the case officer. At the end of deliberation, I will ask members to vote on the officer's recommendation by a show of hands. Only those present in the chamber can vote or propose or second recommendations. For the comfort of councillors, officers and the public, I may choose to call short breaks during the proceedings. If councillors or officers require a break at any point, please indicate to me and I will halt proceedings at the next convenient opportunity. Okay, so I've done apologies already. So declarations of interest, councillors. Councillor Bajan.
Member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign, Chair.
Thank you, councillor. No. Okay, thank you. We can always declare anything later if you need to. Minutes. So can I sign the minutes of 2nd of October as a true record? No one's saying no. Can somebody say yes? Yes, thank you. Sarah. Thank you. So the...
Sorry,
oh, yeah. Yeah. So...
sorry, can you move your page over?
yeah. So one item has been withdrawn. Toby, do you want to just speak about that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this is item 6, which is 6 to 8 Grantchester Road, reference 24/01241/full. Officers recommend this item is withdrawn from consideration at this committee today for 2 main reasons. The first reason relates to a change in the status of the South Newham neighbourhood plan and the weight that can be afforded to that, which has flipped to significant weight. The officer report does not consider the neighbourhood plan in this revised context, which is going to the a January 2025 referendum for adoption. So the officer report in respect of the neighbourhood plan does need to be substantially revised to take into account that material change in circumstances. We're also in receipt of additional third-party technical representations in respect of ecology. Those representations were received after the finalisation of the officer report, and they do raise a number of significant issues that officers consider need further consideration and reflection within the officer report. So the advice is, in the interests of safe decision making, that the item is withdrawn from today's planning committee.
So just to be clear, I presume that item will come to a future meeting of this committee. Thank you, Toby. So we'll go to the first item of today then. So that's item 5, land north of Baberham Park and Ride. Mairead's the case officer, and we've got one speaker who's the applicant's representative, who I think they're both online. So Mairead, if you're ready to present the item then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'll just flick my slides open. So this application seeks full planning permission for the installation of a 132 to 33 kilovolt substation, including 2 grid transformers and a raised switch house, and incorporating all works ancillary to the development of the substation. The proposed substation would transform electricity from the 132 kilovolts supplied by the Fulbourn grid down to 33 kilovolts to then be distributed to another substation that will be proposed in Trumpington. And from here, power can be transformed further so that it can be used by residential and commercial users. So the site lies immediately to the north of Baberham Park and Ride. This is Cherry Hinton Road to the west and Worts Causeway up here, and the Gog Magogs are over to the east, and the site lies in the Greenbelt. So the site is predominantly in South Cambridgeshire District Council's administration. So all of this kind of larger red area here up to here is in South Cambridgeshire. This dotted line here is the boundary between the 2 local planning authorities. There have further been 2 planning applications submitted to deal with the development. The areas within Cambridge City Council's administrative area are just these 2 small areas up here, which I've tried to shade in blue. These include tree and hedge planting that are required for landscape mitigation purposes. The application for South Cambridgeshire District Council, I've included the reference number down here, has already been approved under delegated powers. Due to a difference in the constitution, the application could be determined under delegated powers in South Cambridgeshire. So just to confirm that the only elements that we're considering today are the areas in Cambridge City which are tree and hedgerow planting here. So then I'm not going to dwell very long on this element, as it's dealt with in great detail in sections 11 and section 20 of the committee report. But the applications have demonstrated very special circumstances required by the NPPF. The development is considered critical national provision, as there is an identified urgent need for electricity network infrastructure nationally. It'll help to meet electricity demand for planned growth in the area, and also existing demand for new technologies such as electrical vehicle charging and electrical heating for domestic and commercial premises. Subject to the landscape mitigation proposed, the development is not considered to impact on the purpose or openness of the Greenbelt. And as I've highlighted, the majority of the site falls within South Cambridgeshire District Council, and that application has already been approved. There's been a couple of questions about whether, so there's been a query about, so this application is not a material departure and it falls below the thresholds to be referred to the Secretary of State. And then also another query around whether the application should be considered by this committee or the Joint Development Control Committee, as it's a cross-boundary application. The Joint Development Control Committee, the terms of references include Appendix 3, which shows the mapped areas that fall within the remit of the JDCC. This site doesn't fall within any of those mapped areas, therefore it needs to be considered by each local planning authority's regime and their committees. And then finally, to conclude, there are no material reasons for refusal. The areas of development within Cambridge City relate to tree and hedge planting provision as part of the landscape mitigation for the development. The substantive part of the application, including all of the built elements, are within South Cambridgeshire District Council, and this application for South Cambridgeshire has already been approved. Therefore, the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mairead. So like I said, one speaker, so Rachel Woodman, who's the representative from UK Power Networks, I think. So Rachel, do you want to?
Perfect.
And if you need to put your picture on screen if you want. If you want to turn off the presentation, Mairead, and we can see you in the council chamber where we are. Yeah, hi. So you've got 3 minutes to speak, Rachel. Half a minute before the end, bell will go to let you know you're coming to the end of your time when you're ready.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So as has been mentioned, my name is Rachel Woodman, and I work as part of the project team at UK Power Networks. We own, maintain and operate the electricity cables, overhead power lines and infrastructure across the East, South East and London regions, making sure power flows reliably, safely and securely to end users. The application in front of you today, as Mairead has already said, seeks full planning permission for the installation of a 132,000 volt to 33,000 volt substation adjacent to the Baburn Park and Ride. The proposed substation will take electricity from existing electrical infrastructure across Greater Cambridge and transform it down to lower voltages so it can be safely delivered to homes and businesses as required. The substation falls under South Cambridgeshire District Council, where planning has been approved under delegated powers. However, part of the area within the red line boundary has been identified as falling within Cambridge City Council limits, and this is primarily land designated for tree and hedge planting, and we're seeking permission for this aspect of the proposal. The planting will help to effectively screen views of the substation from local footpaths, roads and the adjoining landscape. This proposal has been developed through extensive consultation over the last 12 to 18 months with planning officers, local parish councils, ward councillors, county councillors, Cambridge past, present and future, the Arthur Rank Hospice and local residents. There have been no objections from either statutory consultees or stakeholders, and feedback from Cambridge past, present and future has been incorporated into the proposal as presented today. The need for this infrastructure is clear. Our alternative sites assessment confirms this, and your officer's report outlines the growing demand for electricity in Cambridge, driven by significant housing and employment growth in the local plan. We have future-proofed the proposal by allowing for additional space within the site itself to accommodate future transformers, but as Mairead mentioned, the whole built development of the substation falls within South Cambridgeshire boundaries. In conclusion, this proposal addresses critical infrastructure needs and supports the transition to a low carbon future. Thank you for your time and for considering this today.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So you can turn your camera off now, Rachel, if you like. Yep. So members, we've been reassured that the Secretary of State doesn't need to be involved, that the Greenbelt side of things is okay. Just to say, it might have been approved by South Cambs, but we haven't approved it yet. I don't know if that in all practical terms matters or not. It seems that most of it's in South Cambs, but I'm thinking it is. And just finally to say, I understand the areas of reference for JDCC, Joint Development Control Committee, and I think I understand those terms of reference, but practically speaking, it would probably be better if it went to a committee like that, rather than coming twice to two separate committees in two separate authorities to make one decision. And maybe JDCC needs a sort of final sort of bullet point on its terms of reference and any other application that affects South Cambs and City. But I'll leave that up to the powers that be. Anyway, today we're considering the item. So any questions for Mairead members? Councillor Dryden.
Simple question, I think. I know it's important and we need to have this building structure, but could it have been built anywhere else?
Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions? Councillor Porter?
Thank you. I do agree it would be better coming to JDCC, but I do appreciate we probably missed it off the terms of reference when we last agreed those. So, but I just want to check the biodiversity net gain is obviously just slightly under 10, and it had this interesting, it's due to trading issues regarding highly distinctive habitats. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. I do welcome the fact that the applicant has future-proofed it, so it will be able to take more in future. I mean, given that South Cambs have already approved this, I'm struggling to see why we wouldn't go with it, given that it is, in effect, enhancing the application, and if we weren't to approve it, it wouldn't have the green screening. I just wondered if Mairead could just note how long it will take for the vegetation to grow up to start shielding the residential developments next to it. Thank you.
Councillor Lokomatova?
So, yeah, first of all, I would totally agree that it's a vital part of the infrastructure, and we need to allow for decarbonization of our grid, and that's a vital stepping stone in this. I just would like for this decision making to be as robust as possible, and the process is clear to the public, because I think in the last full committee there were questions from the public that they don't understand how decisions are made, and in an item like this where we are assessing something that is a critical part of infrastructure, but it's built in the green belt, it's very important that this process is as transparent as possible. So for the sake of it, would the case officer be able to guide us through the alternative site assessment process? Because I don't think we see it quite that often so just to understand how the site was selected, why it was selected, and why there were no other alternatives. That's what was said in the report. Yeah, that's my comment and question.
Thank you, Councillor. So Councillor Page, and then we'll go back to Mairead.
Yeah, I think this is I agree with the previous two councillors. Why is this on a greenbelt site? I mean, the fact that South Cambs don't have a policy not to build things like this on a greenfield site is of no relevance to us. The officer's report says, as the proposal is not one of the exceptions listed in paragraph 154 and 155, therefore is considered harmful to the greenbelt. Why? Why would we pass this? I can't see of any reason why we would agree this. This should be put on building land, and there's plenty of that around in this area. So I think that it's not a good thing to think about approving this.
I've just seen one more hand go up, so I'll do, Councillor Howard, do you, and then we'll go back to Mairead.
One question, and that is, can we know the capacity, I assume in megawatts approximately, of this substation? How much the car chargers would it be expected to use, and therefore how much headroom there is for future dwellings in that area? And just on the point of location, just putting a technical hat on for a sec, I assume, but would like clarification that you don't want to run long distance low voltage cable. So the transformers are typically in the location where they are needed, but clarification would be welcome.
Yeah, thanks. It's all getting very technical, isn't it? So Mairead, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So just on the last point about capacity, I'm not going to be able to provide an answer to how much headroom there is. I don't know if that's something that you want to go to Rachel to see if she's able to provide an answer to that. But to go back to, there's quite a few of the questions seem to relate to the sort of alternative sites assessment and why this is on the greenbelt, and I think they all sort of cross over. So just to clarify that the South Cambs policy isn't sort of different to the Cambridge City policy. It was around the scheme of delegation, and that's why the application has already been approved by South Cambs rather than it being a difference in policy. The alternative sites assessment has been provided by the applicant, and that sets out a radius of area of where a substation would be suitable. As the councillor mentioned, sorry, I'm drawing a blank. The power lines lose power if they move further from the full-borne grid, so it needs to be within a radius of that. So sites were investigated within that radius. A number of sites were identified. All of the sites that were identified fell within the greenbelt. There were no suitable sites identified that were outside the greenbelt. And then within those sites, those were whittled down using other criteria. I think there were 3 sites that were considered suitable, but this was the only site that was considered available by the alternative site assessment. So this is the site that has been progressed. The applicant has provided a substantial amount of information about how this is critical national provision. It's required to sort of bolster the energy network, and that's been identified nationally through the recent policy document that I've quoted in my report, as well as meeting local needs. So I hope that answers the question on the sort of alternative sites process and whether this could have been built somewhere else. And then I think the last question was around was Councillor Poor's points around BNG. So there is a small amount of a shortfall in BNG, so that will mean that the applicant will be required to purchase some credit off-site, and that will be dealt with through condition. And then in terms of the screening from the residential development, I think it will be sort of, so the landscape and visual assessment submitted with the application gives visuals of 3 years and then 3 to 15 years of how the planting will develop. And I think in the kind of, by the 15 years, there will be quite a substantial level of planting. And the colours of the boundary treatment and the switch house, which is the largest kind of element on site, will also be such that they will help blend with the landscape. There will be a sort of green colour. I think that's all of my points.
Thanks, Mairead. Don't really like going back to applicants unless it's a yes, no answer, really. So headroom is going to be a bit more than that. I'm not quite sure. I'll be guided by you, Councillor Howard. Do you want an answer to that question? I can try and get one.
If we're allowed to ask it, that would be great. If we're allowed to ask that.
Yeah, okay, all right. I'll do that then. Did everyone get an answer to their question then satisfactorily? So, looks like it. Okay, so Rachel, one of the councillors has asked if there's sufficient headroom provision, like, you know, will there be enough for the future? But can you answer that question in any useful way for us? Maybe not too technical.
Yeah, so the new grid site would produce a 41 MVA capacity at 33,000 volts. In terms of the number of homes that would power, that's a very difficult figure to provide and not one we have available because we cannot predict exactly what this site would power. It may power anything from commercial employment land to residential houses, but the figure which is equivalent to your megawatts request is 41 MVA.
Yeah, so what's MVA mean?
So it's essentially a measure of the electrical capacity. So it's an equivalent to megawatts that we use to measure capacity.
So it probably means nothing much to residents listening in. So can you say that this is a design of a facility that will last into the future reasonably so?
Yeah, so we have designed it to deal with the growth currently outlined in the local plans of both South Cambs and Cambridge City. At this stage, it doesn't look to provide for growth beyond those local plans, but as I mentioned, the site has been sized sufficiently so that we could add additional primary transformers on site at a later date.
That'll do. Yes or no is really what I wanted. So thank you very much. That's probably reassured us to a certain extent. Thank you. Okay, right. So, councillors, any more questions? I've got a couple I could go back with. No one's putting their hand up, so just me then perhaps. So I've got one question which has come to me thinking about the choice of the site, i.e. in Greenbelt. So, Mairead, is cost a factor for the applicant in choosing a Greenbelt site? And I presume it's cheaper for them to choose that site than a site in an urban or developed area. And the other questions relate to third-party representations. So in 7.2, there's a few bullet points which say things like suggest changes to the planting palette, request specification for the reuse of topsoil, rabbit fencing, more detailed watering specifications. And finally, I'll just say, can we improve on the BNG? Is that not a possibility? It seems rather rubbish, less than 10% increase in biodiversity net gain. So can we not do anything there? Can we not insist? No more questions, that's it then, Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. So cost wasn't one of the criteria in the alternative sites assessment. So that hasn't been a factor that we've considered. There is a neutral third-party representation from Cambridge past, present and future. I think the majority of those have been picked up, so the reuse of topsoil and the rabbit-proof fencing. I think some of the planting that they had suggested was contrary to what had been discussed with the Shared Planning Services landscape officer, so those changes weren't made, but the applicant has gone some way to address those suggestions. And then the last point around biodiversity net gain, the application has been subject to pre-application advice, and the applicant has worked very closely with the Shared Planning Services ecologist. And I think that it has gotten to as far as it can get in terms of biodiversity on site. It would be within the applicant's interest to be able to provide all of its biodiversity net gain on site rather than having to purchase credits. So I don't think there's any further we can push them on that.
Any more for any more? I mean, it's disappointing, really. I think I've seen the off-site location, and it's very nice, but none of our residents are going to go there, practically speaking. And I think it'd be better for biodiversity net gain to be available for the benefit of residents as much as possible or on site. But we're not going to get that today, I don't think. So in that case, have the recommendation then, please, Toby.
Thanks, Chair. So the recommendation's on page 37. That is to approve the application subject to the conditions and informatives as set out in the report, with authority delegated to officers to carry through minor amendments to those conditions and informatives prior to the issuing of the planning permission.
Right, recommendation is approved. All those in favour of the recommendation?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Against?
That's 8 in favour, 1 against.
So the item is approved. Thanks very much, councillors. Thank you, Mairead. Thanks to the speaker, Rachel. So shall we get on with the next item? Everyone okay? Yep, no split. Yep, okay. So next up is item 6 has been withdrawn, just in case anyone's listening in and expecting that to come. For various reasons outlined at the start of the meeting. So item 7 is Darwin Drive, and the officer is Alice Young. And then we've got 2 speakers. We've got Gary Kerr, objector, and Abdul-Uddin, applicant. So,
This was the one that you were not going.
oh yeah, thank you, Sarah. So, okay, so on this item, we'd agreed at the chair's briefing earlier in the week that I would not chair this item because I attended a site meeting not on this application, on a previous application, but on the same site, on the building, with another councillor, Councillor Gawthorpe Wood. We attended it in all good sort of, we thought we were doing the right thing, but we actually literally met with the applicant without an officer present, and that was not good practice. And so in that case, it would be better for this item, even though it's a completely different item, if I did not chair or take part in the debate or vote. I presume the latter 2 are correct as well. Yep. So I'll leave the room. And Councillor Bagent will chair this item. So over to you, Councillor Bagent. Up to you, Councillor, if you want. Yep, fine.
That'll be novel, won't it? So have we, I would like the instructions that you've got there, though, for this, so the speakers. Perhaps I ought to come up there, didn't I? Yeah. Okay, could we have the officer's presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Let me just put it on full screen. Brilliant. So this application is part retrospective permission for a single-storey front and two-storey rear extension with a single-storey projecting bay for a Mumbar pulpit and a two-storey side extension and external alterations at the at 107 Darwin Drive, the Shah Jalal Mosque. So the application site is on the eastern side of Darwin Drive and comprises a semi-detached two-storey building which is currently in use as a mosque. A community and prayer hall is on the ground floor, and there is a residential accommodation at first floor for the resident imam. The site is located in predominantly a residential area, and this is where it is. So there are several previous consents that are material planning considerations in the determination of the application and represent a fallback position. One is for a two-storey rear extension and another is for a single-storey front extension. The applicant has partially constructed these consents. However, given that the proposed two-storey side extension attaches to the previously approved plans, there is a slight change in what's being proposed as a result of the two-storey side extension. So these are kind of partially retrospective, and I'll highlight these changes in the plans. So these are the existing site plans. You'll see that the part of the single-storey front extension has been built out, and same with the two-storey rear extension. So these are some site photos from yesterday. You'll see that some of it has been constructed at the front, and the construction has progressed to the rear to the first floor. So this is the site plan. This is the proposed site plan. You'll see that there is cycle infrastructure here and 2 car parking spaces here. This is the part single, part two-storey rear extension that's already got permission, and the front extension here. This is the side extension. So I've highlighted the differences in red. So you'll see that this is the two-storey side extension. This is the front extension here, which is 50 centimetres wider in depth. So it projects 50 centimetres more. And you'll also see that there is a fenestration changes which allows for the entrance to be on the front elevation as opposed to the side, and it separates the access to the mosque and the residential accommodation above, which is accessible by the side. You'll also note that this is squared off here, and then this meets the boundary with the neighbouring extension. There is also some changes to the fenestration. So this is the proposed front elevation. You'll see that the entrance, as I said previously, has been moved. This is the two-storey side extension, which is modest in proportions. This is the side elevation. These 3 windows at first floor are obscure glazed. And then this is the rear extension. This is the proposed rear elevation. And this is the other side, so this would be a section. So, in terms of the planning balance, as I said previously, the principle of development has already been established under the previous applications. Notwithstanding this, the extensions would enhance the range, quality and accessibility of the community facility to meet the local need by virtue of ratifying the internal space and creating separate entrances to the mosque and the proposed first floor. The design of the proposed extensions are sympathetic to the existing building, appearing subservient, while also being reflective of the surrounding context, which includes domestic extensions of a similar scale, massing and design. And officers consider that residential amenity would not be adversely affected as a result of the development, subject to the recommended conditions, which are as previously proposed in terms of the restrictions to the number of occupants and the timings of use. So, therefore, officers' recommendation is one of approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice. Is there anybody speaking against? Come on, thank you. Is there anybody here to speak against? Could we just check outside to make sure they're not sitting in the lobby? No. Okay, so somebody to speak in favour? You've got 3 minutes if you'd like to sit over there. You'll get a warning just before your 3 minutes runs out. Thank you very much.
No problem, thank you. My name's Abu, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak on behalf of the applicant. I'm going to not kind of dwell too much and take too much of the time up, but just kind of repeat some of the stuff that's already been mentioned. In terms of this particular planning application, it's kind of not linked or changing what's been previously approved in terms of the hours or the number of uses. It is improving the facility access, it being primary, both to the community space for disabled access, making it wider and easier to kind of get to, and also separating the residential property upstairs to the main community space, because at the moment it kind of shares the same kind of entrances to both those. So that's kind of fundamentally sort of the premise of the application, both the retrospective elements of it and the new pieces. In terms of, notes here. Yeah, as I mentioned, so there's no changes to what has previously been discussed and debated and approved. The conditions that have been laid out are ones that we kind of are looking to obviously put in within our planning management plans and kind of evidencing those. Some of the conditions are conditional for the early morning prayers. So all of this stuff, it hasn't changed. This is purely kind of the building and the accessibility being the primary reasons for the changes that have been made or proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors. Is there any debate? Councillor Pora, then Councillor Dryden.
Thank you, Chair. I think members of the committee, which officers should know about, did receive an email earlier from someone in objection who suggested they wanted to speak, but I'm assuming that if they've not appeared, then that is because, well, people have the right to submit a statement if they can't attend. I just want to check, obviously, it seems like an improvement to move the door towards the front. I think the officer mentioned, because I know in previous applications there have been some concerns about comings and going at the side of the property. So I think I concur with the officer that this would be better in terms of residential amenity. And I think obviously anything that allows a better separation from the flat upstairs is beneficial for the resident there. And I just wanted to reiterate, there's no change to any of the other conditions, are there, in terms of this doesn't allow more usage or change any hours, because I think that's an important issue that's come up before. So this is not got any changes, but if the officer could just confirm that again. Could I just check the obscure glazed windows on the first floor on the side, on the non-attached side? there are other windows to the whole of that property, so that wouldn't affect any of the light. I think my understanding is from the plans that that's fine, but I just wanted to double check that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would take Councillor Dryden.
No need for me to say too much more. Councillor Porro just said some of the stuff I was going to say, but yeah, I just agree. I think I agree with what the officers' recommendations are. As just the people who were going to come, it's a shame if they haven't come, but missed their chance. But even if they come, what I've read in the report, I'm minded to vote for this.
Thank you, Councillor Dryden.
Yeah, it's to agree with what's just been said by Councillor Porro and Dryden. I think my only comment is that it does appear that the access has been improved. It just would have helped us if there were internal layouts, because they are relevant to the decision being made. So I don't quite agree that they are greyed out in the. I know it's a technical matter, but it just would have made the case a bit better, a bit clearer, and also like to make a comment. I wish it wasn't retrospective application. I think in this case it's quite clear that it's an improvement since the last application, but we would have been in a difficult position if had it been not an improvement. So because it's already been built. So just as a comment to the applicant, it shouldn't have been a retrospective thing, because we're kind of, it's good that it's improved, but it might not have been. But just generally, I think it's I can't see reasons why it should be rejected at this stage. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you. There's just a couple of brief points there. Would you like to deal with those?
I've just got the proposed ground and first floor plan up. In terms of the windows, this one here, and this one here would be obscure glazed and fixed. In terms of the internal layout, obviously that's been greyed out, but there are windows at the front and rear of the property at first floor. And these are proposed to be obscure glazed to reduce the impact on residential amenity. In terms of the conditions are the same as previously agreed. So ultimately there's no change in the number of people or the hours of operation for the mosque.
Thank you. Are there any other points? Right, we'll go to the recommendation.
Thanks, Chair. So the recommendation is set out on page 87 of the pack before you, and that is to approve subject to the planning conditions as set out, with minor amendments to the conditions as drafted, delegated to officers.
Thank you. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair, of those in the chamber.
Thank you. That seems to be approved. So we'll just take a 5-minute adjournment while we swap back. Thank you.
Claire?
We're live now, Chair.
Okay, welcome back after a short break. Now, next item is 380 Milton Road. That's item 8, and Phoebe Carter is the planning officer, case officer, and we've got speakers, someone called V. Martinelli, who's an objector, and Anne Horan, objector as well. So they're going to be sharing the 3 minutes, and the first one is a statement to be read out, so that'll be done first. So when you're ready then, Phoebe, you can present the item.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for land to the rear of 380 Milton Road, and it's for the demolition of the existing garage and construction of a new single-storey, two-bedroom dwelling.
Phoebe, just put your microphone a bit closer to you so you're a bit louder, please. Thank you.
Is that better? Yeah. Perfect. We just want to add a slight amendment to the screen, which I just want to bring your attention to. We'd like to add an additional informative, which is following liaison with the Fire Authority. They recommend an additional informative is attached to the condition, which is essentially stating that fire service vehicle access should be provided in accordance with approved document B, volume 1 of the building regulations. There should be vehicle access for a pump appliance to within 45 metres of all points within the dwelling house in accordance with paragraph 11.2 of the approved document. Where the proposed new dwelling cannot meet the access requirements for fire appliances, compensatory features should be provided. As the dwelling is located 63 metres from Kendall Way down the access track, we've added this so a sprinkler system can be added in accordance with that information. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So this is the site. It's located to the rear of 380 Milton Road, which is here, which currently has a garage to the rear of the site. And this here is an access track from Kendall Way. This is a photo here of the access track between 1A and 1 Kendall Way. And this is the existing garage on the site. And this here is the annex of the adjacent property. This is an aerial view of the site again, just so you can have some better understanding. This is the site in here with the existing garage. This here is an annex attached. I'd also like to bring your attention to the fact that this site here is currently being developed out into 2 1.5-storey houses, which are currently at foundation level. And there's also an additional dwelling being built, which is accessed off the lane to this property here. I'll just show you a clearer picture here. So on the opposite side of Kendall Way, there is an identical access track, which also serves allotments. And this 2 dwellings have been proposed, single-storey dwellings, to the rear of these 2 properties. This property in here is currently being built out into 2 dwellings, and a further single-storey dwelling has been approved at the end site here. So this proposed site plan is for the demolition of the existing garage and a single-storey 2-bedroom dwelling. As shown on the plan, there is lighting proposed. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the pointer up. Lighting proposed, and a condition has been attached for the construction of the access track following it. So there will be secure lighting to the site. There are bins and bikes to the front of the dwelling. There is no car parking space proposed for this dwelling. And the dwelling is set around an internal courtyard in this location, and it has access to a rear garden, private amenity space to the rear. And as I said previously, this here is an annex to the adjacent property. So this is the proposed floor plan. As shown down here, there is bin and bike storage to the front. Conditions have been attached to secure the details of these features. And there's the 2 double bedrooms surrounding this internal courtyard, as well as the doors. They are both served by roof lights, so officers are satisfied that there is sufficient lighting and they meet space standards, and building control regulations M42 condition has been attached. So here is the front elevation, which you can show it's being built in a not too dissimilar form from the annex as viewed from the lane, with a similar height and form. There is a planned planted wall to the front, which will add some soft landscaping to the frontage. From the proposed side elevation, you can see the dotted line here of the proposed annex. The eaves height is about approximately 2.6 metres, and beyond the rear elevation of the annex, the roof pitches away. This would not intersect the BRE guidance regarding light, and officers consider that it wouldn't lead to a significantly harmful level of enclosure or loss of light to the annex, given the height and pitch of the eaves and the ridge line. There have been no objections from consultees regarding access, or from environmental health from the Highways Authority or environmental health. Ecology are also satisfied that there will be biodiversity enhancement on the site, and the demolition of the garage would not impact protected species, in particular bats. There have been third-party representations received on regards to impact on the character and appearance of the area and overdevelopment of the site. Officers consider that given that the development along the lane is changing and the single-storey nature, this wouldn't harm this character of the area. The impact of the residential amenity has been discussed within the report, but officers consider, especially the adjacent annex, that it wouldn't lead to a loss of enclosure or privacy, and environmental health are satisfied, subject to conditions, that it wouldn't lead to any noise or disturbance. In regards to the highway safety and access, conditions have been attached as set out previously for the condition of the track, and no highway safety issues have been raised by the Highways Authority. So these are most of the comments. We have also had comments in support of the application regarding design and encouraging small builds. So overall, the construction of the dwelling is in a sustainable location, close to a district centre, and there's sufficient garden land retained for both dwellings, and officers consider that the proposal would meet policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Phoebe. What have we got? Anne, isn't it? Yeah. Anne, do you want to come forward to the public speaker thingy? Maureen, do you come in as well, or are we just come in support? Okay, right, yep, hi. So we've got a statement to be read out first. How long do you think yours lasts for? Okay, great. Okay, we'll do the statement first and then we'll go to you. Yep, all right, thank you. So when you get your turn, right, not yet. When you get your turn, sorry to muck you around, you press the button on the right-hand side, the thing lights up, and half a minute before the end, the bell will go to let you know you're coming to the end of your 3 minutes. So just carry on, and then I'll stop you when I think you've got a run over or anything. Okay, thanks.
The latest proposal remains unchanged in that the size is disproportionate to the land, part of the rear garden of 380 Milton Road, and cannot be described as anything but a huge overdevelopment, leaving almost no garden for either properties, 380 or 380A. Zero consideration for neighbours who will be negatively impacted, especially as the proposed buildings will look directly into both 378 and 378A and beyond. The proposed build sits on both boundaries, and while I appreciate that things change over time, 378A was held by the planners to keep 50 centimetres, even though there was only garden next door from the boundary, and this was respected. If the proposed build is permitted to build on the boundary next to 378A and not just garden, There will be no possibility to access the side of the building to carry out maintenance, and this is of great concern, especially as a couple of years ago a significant fire, which started on the proposed site of 380A and required the intervention of the fire service, caused damage to 378A. Has this been considered? If so, is this report risk assessment available to view? The damage caused was rectified at the time, but would be impossible to do if 380A is permitted to be built on the boundary. For the record, it will be the responsibility of the landlord of 380 and 380A and or the consenting body, Cambridge Council, to cover any extra costs incurred due to inaccessibility to carry out any maintenance by 378A. Proposed tree planting will no doubt remove light from 378A and roots could potentially cause damage to 378A due to the proximity. Please consider all previous comments made on the planning portal and face-to-face meetings. As I never received a response feedback from previous comments left on the portal, I'd like to confirm once more the lane due behind the row of houses, including 378, adjacent to the council-owned allotments, is not owned by 380.
All right, thank you. We're going to run over time a bit, but I'll use my chair's prerogative to allow you to go over a little bit, just so we get all the information. It's going to make a robust decision. So when you're ready.
Yeah. I live at number 384, and to add to the points already made, all previous objections still stand. It is increasingly difficult for families to live in this area, with the housing stock being turned into HMOs and gardens being covered with new builds that don't fit the character of the area. There's real concern for the cumulative increased demand on existing sewage infrastructure, and that flooding will be increasingly likely as the areas of vegetation shrink. This new bungalow is over twice the footprint of the original dwelling at 380, imposing to the surrounding properties, bringing noise and light pollution. There is already a large garden or ground floor extension attached to the main house, and a wall that prevents access to the back garden via a side entrance. With the proposed building also boundary to boundary, this means there is no access to the back garden of either property, including for emergency vehicles. You've already heard about a previous fire. It would be a serious planning error if that happened again. The new bungalow's courtyard provides daylight to the 2 bedrooms, but an annex wall will limit the light that can get through. The 2 bedrooms have been redesigned with French doors to allow more light in, but to make them private, they have frosted glass. This will make the bedrooms scarily like prisons and rely on overshaded skylights for natural light. The plans have also been designed with large bifold doors to the rear, with the new bungalow's living area easily overlooked by bedrooms in 376 to 384. Overall, a bad design for this site. Planning has already confirmed that the drag distance to the waste collection point is 70 metres, almost 3 times the recommended distance of 25. And as you have heard, the lane is not owned by 380, but by the City Council. This means that they cannot lay pipes or cables under the lane as described. Annexes at 376 and 378 have organised access via their main houses. Thank you.
Right, thanks. Thank you. So that was 3 minutes 44, but I just let the speakers go on a bit because I thought it was important we got all that information. So yeah, there's no one speaking in support, so that's it. So members, questions? Okay, Councillor Locomotiva.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a few concerns with this proposal. First of all is those 2 bedrooms that are facing each other and don't have any views out, or I actually do agree there will be a limited daylight. I mean, it's on one hand, there will be 2 roof lights above, which, yeah, they will provide daylight, but going to be quite difficult to control in terms of overheating. So they're very likely to need like means of shading. And on the other hand, they don't have any direct views out. So I'm just wondering if there is anything in our policy that dictates for bedrooms to have views out. And I would also like to, for a dwelling this size, I would expect to see clear details of the cycle provision. So I know that the condition is proposed for those details to be provided prior to occupation. I think the officers should see them prior to commencement on site, because prior to occupation it's quite difficult to do anything about the details which officers might not be happy about. So it's three things: it's daylighting, overheating, and cycling.
Thank you, councillor. Right, I'll say a couple of things. So Phoebe, the whole thing with the fire access is normally a building control thing, but I see we've got the condition, but 63 metres, I think it was, wasn't it, or something like that, 60 plus metres is quite a long way. Bit concerned about that. I'm presuming the fire tender can't get down this track then, so it would be accessed. Well, fire will be dealt with by sprinklers, or it will be accessed by pipes coming from a tender on the street, I guess. Are we concerned with that, or is that just a building control thing? I suppose if we have the condition, we're done with that, maybe. So track width, the 2.6 eaves height, that seems quite high. So that's up against the boundary of the neighbour, as far as I could gather, and also overshadowing that neighbour on the side away from morning sun. So the neighbour on the right-hand side, as I look at the plan, seems rather concerning. Obviously, you're okay with that, I guess, in your recommendation. And in terms of lane access, I mean, I suppose if it's a city council lane, then it's a civil matter in terms of any issues with regard to that. But it is concerning. I suppose also the main thing I'd say is the overdevelopment of the site comes to mind, really. It's quite a big development, some boundary to boundary. I remember when I looked at a house once to look at building an extension on the back, I was recommended to build it in sort of 600 from the boundary, but this isn't doing that. So are you content with that in terms of access, repair, blank walls right up onto the boundary of the neighbour? Seems a bit much to me, but what do others think? Anyone else? Councillor Pora?
Thanks. Yes, I was going to ask similar about, from what I understand, both gardens, so the host dwelling and the new dwelling, will only be accessible via the properties, I think if I've understood rightly, because there's not a side access. And picking up on the chair, is there a local plan policy to stop that? It's not particularly desirable because, but equally I'm not sure, I noticed the speaker in objection was saying that they wouldn't be able to do maintenance on the house, but then there are lots of houses like that, so it'd be interesting to know whether that point would be valid, because I think they suggested the city council would have to pay, which I don't think is the case. I do share concerns about the bedrooms as well. I mean, a roof light is obviously a source of light, but it doesn't necessarily open. So that would mean if you want to have any kind of air circulation at night, you'd need to leave your door open, unless I've misunderstood and it's a window and a door. But I think it's doors opening into the external courtyard, if I'm right. So that concerns me, because unless the skylight opens, then they've got no air circulation. So condition 10 talks about resurfacing the lane. I'm really pleased that officers have got this condition, because we quite often have these backland developments and they're coming over these really badly maintained tracks. So I welcome the fact you've managed to negotiate that. However, if the track is owned by the city council, which was the suggestion of one of the objectors, I'm not totally clear what would happen if the city council said no, or for example, in terms of putting in the utilities that would be needed for lighting. The condition does have a prior to development, so there is a stop in there, but obviously if the council were not to agree it, could this stop the development? Are we happy that that is robust enough? Because it's always, and again, presumably if that's a shared access way, other people aren't going to contribute towards that, but that's fine, that's what the applicant has agreed. I noticed condition 4 about green stuff. Planted walls, as I've said many times, will always fill me with horror because they tend to be dead walls quite quickly. Can we make sure that that condition includes something about maintaining that planted wall? Because I'm worried that if that doesn't work, we're not going to achieve BNG, biodiversity net gain. And with the HMO, the class 4 permitted development where you can move from C3 to C4, so from residential to HMO, could we remove that permitted development right? Because we did at JDCC last week for a whole bunch of them. So again, a question for officers or possibly for Toby for that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just had one further thing. I'll come to you, Councillor Bajan, just to pick up on Councillor Lokapatova's and Councillor Porras' points is in terms of light and air and roof lights and lack of windows, isn't this pretty much the same situation as a single aspect dwelling would be in terms of air circulation and so on? I mean, there's not a lot to get the air through, is there really? It's just going to be stagnant as far as I can see with just a roof light to open. Anyway, Councillor Bajan. Try another one.
Okay, here, use my.
That work, officers?
Thank you. Couple of points. I think the permitted development, this might be one of those cases where we wouldn't want to allow permitted development and that we would actually remove that right. I clearly have some concern about the distance from the road. The officers asked for the surface of the access road to be improved. Could we make that a requirement to be up to 14.5 tonnes weight so that a fire appliance could actually drive down there, which would then reduce the problems in regards to fire? Yeah, there's sort of 2-3 points stroke.
All right, thanks. I think we'll go back to Phoebe now then. So a lot of concerns expressed by all of us there, really, Phoebe. If you can reassure us, then maybe we'll change. But at the moment, it's a lot of concerns. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the bedrooms, there is nothing in the policy regarding having a view from a bedroom window. I mean, the aspect from the bedroom window is over an an internally landscaped courtyard of the development. It's shown on the plan and details that it's going to have some planting. It's not the widest distance between bedrooms, but it's within a shared. Well, it's within a single dwelling house, and it's overlooking a courtyard. So I don't think, and there's nothing in the policy that specifically says that bedrooms have to have, or what views a bedroom has to have. The bedrooms are served both by roof lights and by, it's shown on the plan as French doors. Whether there is a third window, because it's shown as sort of wall-to-wall windows, whether that one of the windows, the pane of glass has a separate opening window, isn't shown on the plans, and it's not something that we can control within planning, within conditions. So officers are satisfied that the bedrooms would have sufficient light. And in regards to overheating, they are served by a roof light, but they also have 2 opening windows with the doors and the roof light. So how they manage shading isn't. I don't think it would lead to a significantly harmful level of overheating of the rooms. In regards to the cycle parking, they have shown us the location of the cycle parking on the site. They haven't given us the full details of the cycle enclosure. Just share my screen quickly. So they have shown us the location of the cycle parking, which meets standards to the front of the dwelling, and they've also given us an indication that it would have a sedum roof cover, and then the further details are going to be secured via the condition. So we're satisfied that there is sufficient space and it's in an accessible location to the front of the properties. In regards to fire access, technically for a tender from the road, it should be 45 metres, and which is why we have added the informative for sprinklers to assist with this, and that would meet building regulations. In regards to the eaves height of 2.6 metres being high, under permitted development class E, they could build a fallback position would be that they could build a outbuilding, obviously not a dwelling, but an incidental outbuilding with an eaves height of 2.5 metres adjacent to the boundary. So it would only be 0.1 metre higher than what could be achieved in that. And so in that sense, officers do not consider that 2.6 metres is particularly high for an eaves height. In addition, the roof is pitching away from the boundary beyond the rear elevation of the annex, which can be seen on this plan here. So it's pitching away from the boundary, and it wouldn't intersect the BRE, recommended BRE guidance, which officers are therefore satisfied that the annex would not have a harmful loss of light. In regards to the lane access, we have had confirmation from the applicants that they can achieve the repair and sort of surfacing of the track and lighting. Obviously, details will come forward as part of the condition. In regards to overdevelopment of the site, it's not too significant from other outbuildings and annexes to the rear of the property. I've just put up on the screen the existing aerial footage or aerial shot of the lane. The development would come 0.5 metre beyond the rear elevation of the existing garage on the site. And the rear of this lane is quite heavily developed with different forms of buildings, from both dwellings to annexes and outbuildings. So officers do not consider that there would be an overdevelopment of the site. The garden size for the proposed property would be 58 square metres, and the garden size for the main dwelling would be 60 square metres, which would be a satisfactory size for both dwellings. In regards to access and repair, there is nothing in our policies that say that dwellings have to be set in from the boundary, and the repair and maintenance of the properties is a civil issue, and it's not something that can be controlled by planning conditions. So there is nothing that says that dwellings have to be set in from the boundaries, and there is nothing set out in policy saying that access to the rear gardens is required. In regards to the condition regarding the planting, we have said that the maintenance should be for a period of 5 years. In regards to any trees or shrubs, so there is a condition for 5 years on there. The removal of the HMO, I don't think it would be reasonable to add for a single dwelling of a two-bed dwelling. I don't think it would be reasonable to request technically a C4 dwelling is for 3 to 6 people. So the fact it's a 2-bedroomed house, I think would be unreasonable to request the removal in this instance. If it was a potentially larger house with 3 or more bedrooms, then I think it's something that would be more considered.
talking about removal of PD rights, we have removed classes A, B and E from permitted development for the dwelling as part of the conditions already, and I think that's covered most of the comments. Thank you.
Yeah, well done. That's good. Thank you. Right, any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Pora.
Thanks. Just with regard to the landscaping condition, can we make sure it includes the vertical planting? Just because when you say trees and shrubs, I think that's an assumption that they might not be trees and shrubs. And if that's being included in the BNG, so, you know, if it doesn't work, that's fine, but it would need to be replaced elsewhere. So I think that is just wonder if you'd be willing to add something in to specify. I think the officers come back very helpfully on most of my points. It's a bit frustrating about the side access, but, you know, there's no policy to stop that. The concern I have at the moment is still the bedrooms. I mean, we went on holiday and I stayed in a bedroom that had only a roof light. And it's, apart from being a bit of a pain to draw curtains, because you can't, you have to use a big pole to shut them. Could the officer confirm, if you look at that external courtyard, is there a window next to the French doors? Because what I want to make sure is there's something you can open, because otherwise if it's raining and hot, you can't open a skylight because the rain will come in, and you don't really want to be leaving your door open in case someone comes in. So if there's I think at the moment I don't feel I've got quite enough information. I'm not very happy with the conditions in the bedroom unless we can ensure that there is an opening window. And I'm also, are the doors going to be obscured? Because again, for me, if there's not a window, I'd always prefer the doors not to be obscured, or to be obscured up to a certain height, because if that was a window, we wouldn't be obscuring it. And obviously there can be overlooking issues, but you can use curtains and net curtains. So I just wonder if Phoebe could have a look and confirm if the doors coming out of the courtyard are obscured or not, and if those are windows just coming out to the outside wall, because I would want to be absolutely certain that they were openable before I agreed to these bedrooms. Because it's not about the light, it's about, you know, lying in bed and not being able to cool the room down without the rain coming in. Thanks.
Any more councillors? Councillor Bajan?
Thank you, Chair. The access road, could the officer be a bit more specific about the terms that we might put on that? Because if it would take a 15-tonne vehicle, then that does do away with the concerns about the fire appliance.
Thank you. Look, Councillor Komatova.
I would like to come back to the permitted development rights, and I would like to understand what is our threshold, because even though it's a 2-bedroom house, there are 2 rooms which can potentially accommodate 4 people, and they will qualify. That's each of them around 12 square meters, which would be enough to host 2 people in each. So does it have any weight in our decision making? Because if we're going to approve this application, I would probably like to see that permitted development rights are removed, because it can be turned into an HMO hosting 4 people at least. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howard.
Yeah, it's a broader question about what the slightly wider context of this. What I can see in combination with other approved applications is effectively becoming a close, accessed by a track. So yeah, is there not anything that can be done to require those developers or those residents who have in their own home, in their own back gardens, or in back gardens that are now or due to be sold, have a collective responsibility for making sure those improvements are made? Otherwise, it would surely fall to the City Council if it's becoming effectively its own little close of back garden dwellings.
Yeah, it makes sense, but I don't know if it works that way normally. Anyone else? Right, back to you then, Phoebe. One thing for me as well. You said about lighting a couple of times, so I presume you meant lighting on the track. So what's that all about then? How's that going to work? Do you know? And I think there was a comment on, because it's a City Council track, supposedly civil matter, of course, but how's the lighting going to be installed there? Do we know?
Thank you. We could add extra wording to the landscaping condition to include the vertical planting. In regards to the bedrooms, the plans do not show that the French doors are frosted glass. There's nothing on the plans that indicate whether they are clear or opaque glass. And so we don't have, essentially they could install frosted or clear glass, and as it's internal, it's not something that we would usually look to condition. The plans do not show the internal wall for the window opening, so I cannot confirm whether or not there is a top hung opening window as well as the doors. It's not, all it's shown as a piece of glazing. So there's a window and then there are the opening doors. So because there's no internal elevation showing that, I can't confirm whether or not there is a top opening a window on that wall. I don't think it would be reasonable for us to condition that the weight of the road could there is no parking on the site, and I understand that there is the question regarding fire trucks and larger vehicles using the site, but I don't think it would be fair to the applicant to insist that the trackway is essentially upgraded to the standard for those vehicles. In that sense, there is an informative that has been added regarding a sprinkler system and ensuring that it qualifies for building control regulations for distances from the highway. I don't think it would be reasonable in this instance to condition the weight of the road. I mean, it's 2 bedrooms. I don't think it would be really necessary in this instance to add a PD rights removal from class C3 to C4 because it is 2 bedrooms. However, if councillors really want this added, then it is something that we could look at also adding to the permission. In regards to lighting, there is a condition that was also attached to the 2 dwellings at the front of the lane to add lighting and improve the construction of the pathway to those dwellings. So there is already a permission and a condition attached, and the permission is currently being built out, that they will improve the construction of the track and add lighting to the first part of the track, but obviously that goes approximately sort of 4 houses up the track. And so it's likely that by the time this is built out, then they will just be adding to the remaining part of the track. They haven't provided, they provided some details on the existing plan regarding lighting, which would be low lux level solar powered lighting, which is fixed to the allotment fencing, however, and also a main powered light fixed to their boundary wall at the further end of the track, but other details of that will come forward as part of the condition. I don't think they have considered the full details, and they'd also need to work with the City Council on how these were to be installed, but that is part of the condition which has been attached for the details to come forward at that point. In regards to the highway becoming adopted, this isn't something that we could really condition or have part of this application. If and when more dwellings come up and the highways would look to adopt it, that would be a separate issue for the County Council regarding the adoption of the existing track. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Phoebe. You're doing very well under lots of questions, I think, on this item. This is really to do with the item more than anything else. And I can see your hand up, Councillor Bora, but Toby just wants to come back on a couple of things before we go on.
Thanks, Chair. Really helpful comments from Phoebe. So we don't have the internal plans from either bedrooms in terms of the elevations. I think it would be within the committee's power to propose a compliance condition to ensure that the windows that are being shown on plan form are openable for future occupants. Are happy to accept that suggestion.
Yeah, did you want to say anything further on PD rights as well, or are you happy with what Phoebe said so far?
I think Phoebe's completely spot on. It doesn't seem to be necessary in this case. If it was slightly larger dwelling, I think there would be perhaps kind of grounds to suggest it. So when we come to the vote, if councillors want to impose that, there would have to be a motion because officers aren't supportive of a condition removing that particular PD right to C4 HMO use.
Righto, thanks. Councillor Bora.
Thank you, Toby. Addressed my first point. Yeah, I'd be happy if we could have a condition that insists on opening windows to both the bedrooms. And I'd be happy if they aren't obscured glazing for the main doors, because I think that can be dealt with by curtains or stuff that people apply themselves. I'm torn on the PD rights, having, as members will know, recently done a motion on this at council. I was interested that we did remove them at JDCC. I've never seen it before, which is why I asked. That was for a large development where there were concerns that it would change the character. I'm really torn on that. Part of me thinks we should do it because, you know, it puts a marker down, but I'm also mindful that local plan at the moment doesn't impose any restrictions on class 4 anyway, does it? Because policy 48, if I remember rightly, was it 28, only talks about sui generis, so I'm not sure it would actually have a huge amount of teeth, much as I hate to say it, which is one of the issues in our motion, is we're trying to look at how we strengthen the next local plan to do this, because obviously for the smaller ones, particularly 3 people, they don't even need licensing. So I'm torn on that one. I'm mindful that it may not be reasonable, as we haven't for others, but equally there is a huge concentration here. This is a much, as Councillor Howard said, this is now becoming basically a functioning road rather than a sort of backland access. So I'd be guided by Toby and Phoebe, because if we do remove them, it doesn't stop anyone changing it. They just have to ask the council's opinion. But if we don't have a policy to back up small ones changing at the moment, then I'm not sure whether it has any teeth. So I'd be grateful if Phoebe and Toby could comment on that. So it's just a bit of one I've done a lot of research on recently as it has happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been quite clear. We don't think there are grounds. There's not an explicit policy that you could refer to. The councillors are talking about removing a national permitted development right from C3 to C4. I don't think that the size of the dwelling kind of merits a removal of that particular right, and it goes without saying if you're granting permission for a dwelling, then it would have to be in first use as a dwelling rather than in C4 use.
So just to be clear, PD rights have been talked about. That's permitted development for residents listening in. And the main thing that we're discussing at the moment is whether we should allow this dwelling to be used, to be rented out, like an Airbnb type of thing. I think that's what we're talking about, aren't we? So whether we can control that with this particular condition on this particular dwelling, I think it's debatable. I mean, we have to be reasonable. It's a quasi-judicial committee. As Toby has laid out, really, we have National Planning Policy Framework, which supports the use of this dwelling in the way that's proposed. So it's a bit tricky to be making a different set of assumptions about one dwelling in the city. There may be other ways to control Airbnbs and such like by different measures that authorities can bring in, not by this particular measure. But It's up to you eventually, members, you're the decision makers. If you want to propose something and second something, we can have a vote on it. But remember that conditions do need to be reasonable. Councillor Agian.
Chair, on permitted development, the site is quite constricted. The new owner or any owner of that building would be able to use permitted development to extend the building further into the garden of that site. And my concern about permitted development is in that regard, not so much in regards to HMOs. I think that we should shut that doorway. If they want to apply for planning permission to extend the building, then they could. But that's what I'm talking about in regard to permitted development. Yeah,
okay, there are different things to do with permitted development, so Toby's going to respond to that.
So, Councillor, if you turn to page 112 and 113, conditions 13 and 14 remove rights, firstly, under Class A to extend the dwelling, and condition 14 removes the right to erect a freestanding building within the curtilage. That's what those two conditions do in that respect, and that it's considered reasonable to remove these particular aspects of PD rights because of the nature of the scheme that's come forward and the limited garden space in particular.
Thanks, Toby. Okay, Councillor Porrer.
I have just checked policy 48 and it is very clear that it's larger houses that the restrictions apply to. So actually if we remove PD rights, then we'd have to grant it as soon as we've got planning permission because there isn't a policy under 48 that would restrict it, is my understanding. So I have to, much as I would like to do it, I think I agree with Toby and Phoebe that in this instance, I don't think it's policy supported, unfortunately.
All right, thank you. So Toby responded to a question by a member there, Phoebe. I don't know if you wanted to add anything more to that or whether you're content with the answer.
I'm fine with the answer, thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, then we'll go to recommendations. So, Toby?
Thanks, Chair. So the recommendations set out on page 109 of the officer report, that is to approve subject to the planning conditions as set out with minor amendments to the conditions as drafted delegated to officers. It includes an additional informative with regard to the fire service part B and sprinklers. It includes an amendment to condition 4 to include specific reference to the maintenance of the green wall, and it also includes an additional condition, a compliance condition, seeking to ensure that the windows to both bedrooms and the ground floor of the property are openable. The drafting of those conditions delegated to officers.
Yeah, so recommendation approval. All those in favour of that recommendation?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in favour.
Against? Abstentions?
2.
Okay, thanks so much. The item's approved. Thanks very much. So thanks to the speakers. Thank you, Phoebe. Members, do you want to have a break for lunch, or do you want to carry on with the last two items, which could go another hour, maybe? Could be a bit. And I'm aware that one member needs to leave by 12 at the latest. One more? Well, that leaves only one more after lunch, then. That's the only thing. Is that? All right. Okay. So everyone okay to carry on then? Yep. So next item is item 9, 26 Foster Road. Dominic's the case officer, and no speakers on this item. So when you're ready then, Dominic, present the item.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this application is at 26 Foster Road in Cambridge and is proposing an extension to the existing garden room conservatory to the rear of the property and the change of use of the building from a C4 small HMO to an 8-person sui generis large HMO, including cycle parking to the front garden. Yes, there are no amendments or updates to note since the reports pack has been published. And on the left-hand side of the screen now, you can see the location plan for the application. So the site here is accessed off Foster Road to the east, and the existing property is a middle terrace property with a fairly expansive garden to the rear that's blazed out here. And on the right-hand side of an aerial view of the site, you can see the nearby playing fields here to the northeast. And you may also be able to make out the parking on street of cars within the surrounding area. Here we have the existing and proposed site plan for the application, so the existing on the left and proposed on the right. So to the front of the property, the proposed site plan, you can see this area here is the proposed cycle store, and there is the bin store here. Again, shows the size of the rear garden of the dwelling. And this is the proposed ground and first floor plans for the dwelling. And so the ground floor plans on the left, this area here with the setting to the rear. So from where it says lounge dining upwards is the proposed extension to provide additional communal space at ground floor. And then there are 2 of the 8 units at ground floor level here. It might be worth noting that whilst they show double beds, that every unit within the building is a single person unit. Within the first floor plan on the right, there are additional 4 of the 8 units. Again, worth noting, as set out in my report, units 2 and 5 are 2 of the 3 that fall below the 7.5 metre squared space standards for a single bedroom. But it's clear within policy 48 that for HMOs, or for changes of use to HMOs, policy 50 and the space standards requirements are an aspiration rather than a finite requirement. And in this case, it was considered that the communal space at ground floor, in addition to the large garden, was sufficient to account for that minor under provision in the 3 units. And moving on to the second floor plan, so these are the 2 additional units within the roof of the property. Unit 6 here to the top utilises the rear-facing dormer, which is existing, so has 11.5 metres squared of usable floor space. Unit 7 to the bottom here has approximately 7 metres squared of usable floor space, which is that over 1.5 metres head height. So there's an additional 5 square metres, which is under 1.5 metres head height, and therefore isn't counted towards the space standards.
What did you say then? It's about space standards?
So only floor area which has a head height of greater than 1.5 metres is counted towards space standards. Here we have the proposed front and rear elevations for the building. So within the front elevation to the left, you can see the cycle store here to the right of the front of the property, and bin area here with the car parking in the middle. Within the rear elevation, this is the rear dormer that I mentioned that's existing at the property. And then this building here with the slight setting, so the patio doors, that's the extension proposed to the rear of the dwelling. Here we have a side elevation and section of the property. So within the section on the right-hand side, this is unit, I believe, 6 here, which I was referencing at second floor with the head height. So the room area of the room to the right here is below 1.5 metres, and the 1.5 metres head height is roughly with the right-hand side of that door there. These are just the cycle store details. So this is the cycle store that's proposed to the front right of the property, with space for 8 cycle parking spaces, which is policy compliant. This is a photo of the front of the site taken from the street scene. So as you can see, there's currently space for the parking of 2 cars in the front of the dwelling. But with the addition of the cycle parking and the bin storage, it wasn't considered there was space for 2 car parking spaces with suitable access for the cycle parking. But it was considered that it was preferable to have the cycle parking in a convenient location to the front of the dwelling, as opposed to additional car parking. With regards to consultee comments, so none of them have raised any objection to the proposed development subject to conditions. Again, worth noting that the highways mentioned the possible impact on parking demands within the surrounding area due to the reduction of car parking spaces. With regards to third-party representations received in objection, they've raised all of the above points here. Worth noting that the only change to the design of the dwelling is the rear extension, demolished rear extension proposed to the rear, and it was also not considered that the noise impacts resulting from 8 units within the building would significantly increase from the possible 6 allowed without planning permission currently. And therefore, it's considered that the provision of cycle parking in a convenient location at the front of the dwelling outweighs the minor harm through the potential for increased parking stress within the surrounding area, and the officer recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, thanks, Dominic. Okay, I think the applicant is to be commended on the quality of information in the drawings, at least, if not generally. So well done to them. Questions? Yes, Councillor Lokomatova.
Could the case officer please guide us through the existing plans and what's being proposed? So what is being done to change from 6 people HMO, which is C4, to 8 people HMO, which is sui generis? Because it's quite an interesting one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Just to add to that, it does drawing say 6 to 10 tenants, actually. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Bora.
One really basic question. It keeps saying shower room. I'm assuming they all have a toilet in because it's only drawn on one of them. I'm sure it probably is, but you know, always worth checking. Yeah, it's a slight shame the 3 bedrooms are below space standards. Picking up on Councillor Lokmatova's question, are these rooms already there? Because it would just, in the roof one, if that is being rebuilt, the bedroom 6 is 4 metres over and bedroom 7 is just slightly under. So presumably if they haven't yet built it, I'm sure we would be amenable to a small amendment to make that space standard, but I don't know if they're already in situ. Condition 5 is the one that controls the use of the non-habitable rooms, so like the living areas. Could we please explicitly include the outbuilding in that, just to be clear that, because I understand that's going to be kind of like a utilities, presuming that's washing machines and tumble dryers and stuff. Would the officer accept to include that in there, just so that we're very clear that that is part, because at the moment it says internal rooms and obviously that is an external one. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back to you then, Dominic.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll start by sharing my screen with the existing plans. So the existing plans that I have show the same internal layout as the proposed building. I've clarified with the agent as to the current use of the building, and it's understood there's currently 4 people occupying the building, but the internal layout is the same, so I don't think it would be reasonable, from my view, to change the layout for that reason. It's also my understanding that all of the bathrooms, despite not necessarily showing toilets on the plans, are proposed to include toilets. And I personally don't have any objection, I don't know if Toby does, as to adding the outbuilding to condition 5. Sorry, yeah, no objection to adding the outbuilding to condition 5 to include within the management plan, given that it's shown on the plans as such. Thank you.
Councillor Lokomatova.
I think I'm quite baffled by this application because the plans show, existing plans show 7 bedrooms as 7 units, and the license is for this being used as a 7 people HMO. So in fact, it's not an upgrade from a C4 to sui generis. It's already been used as a 7 people HMO as it is from. So my understanding that we're actually looking at a retrospective application, unless I'm corrected, because what I see in plans is already 7 units there and they're already built. So the only differences between existing plans and what's being proposed is the extension of community space and conversion of one part of the building into the 8th bedroom. And I think it's quite misleading as to what we are looking at now. And so can we just have a clarification on this? Because it's already been used as a sui generis without applying permission.
Right, okay. Do you want to turn your microphone off, please, Councillor? Thanks. Toby?
I think the distinction, Councillor, is around the number of people occupying the unit. As Dom said, the number of people currently occupying is 4 people. So that would be C4. So when you jump from C4 to sui generis HMO, the control that the council has and the way that the legislation works, it relates to the number of people, not necessarily the number of bedrooms within a property.
Councillor Rokmatova?
Does it bear any weight that the license is for 7 people? The license is for 7 people and it's already been granted. So in theory, there is nothing that can prevent the landlord for letting it out to 7 people as it is now.
No, so they're different. So they're different legislation. So licensing is one thing, but in order for 7 people to live in the property, they require planning permission for a sui generis HMO use, hence the application.
Okay, if we're all done then, did you have anything further to say, Dominic, at all? No? Okay, right. Recommendation then, please, Toby.
Mr. Chair, so the recommendation is set out on page 126. That is to approve subject to the planning conditions as set out with minor amendments to the conditions as drafted delegated to officers. It includes a revision to condition 5 to reference the non-habitable use of the outbuilding, the drafting of that condition delegated to officers. Thank you.
Thanks. So recommendation approval. All those in favour of that recommendation?
8 in favour.
Against?
None.
Abstentions?
1.
Okay, item approved. Thanks very much. Thank you, members. We have one more item. Does anyone need to leave now at all? It's 12 o'clock. Okay, so the last item, I presume, we'll discuss Councillor Grant. Do we? Oh, well, yeah, one more planning item, then an appeals report. Yeah, is that right? So we'll just carry on then. You okay with that? No one's complaining? Yeah, okay. 2 minute, okay, 2 minute break. Come back for the next item. So welcome back after a short break. So next item is item 1024 Mere Way. Phoebe is the case officer, and we've got objectors' statements to be read out from Ms. Baz and Dean Taylor, who's the applicant. The latter is the applicant, the former is an objector. So Phoebe, when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just put it up on screen. So this is an application for 24 Mere Way, which is for the erection of a one-bedroom, single-storey dwelling at the rear of 24 Mere Way. So the site is located to the rear of number 24, which is a two-storey end-of-terrace property, which is situated on the crossroads of Mere Way, Humphreys Road and Brackley Close. Brackley Close is a cul-de-sac which has two-storey dwellings on the opposite side of the road. There is a substation adjacent to the boundary of the site, and then further west are three-storey blocks of flats, and it's a predominantly residential area. So this is just an aerial view of the site showing the end of terrace property. They also have off-street parking in the form of a garage to the side, number 24. And here are the three-storey blocks of flats with an outbuilding for the use of the residents. So the proposed site is to split the property, split the rear amenity area and form a one-bedroom, single-storey dwelling to the rear with parking accessed off Brackley Close and with a garden. The cycle store is accessed from the rear garden from the side access. This is the proposed floor plan. The property meets space standards and is disabled, meets M42. And here are the proposed front and rear elevations. So the materials of the front elevation are buff bricks and render, which is in character with the area. And the proposed roof is a Semper Green sedum roof. So it'll be a green roof on the whole of the dwelling. And these are the proposed side elevations of the property. And again, here is a roof plan showing that other than the solar panels, it's going to be a biodiverse green roof, which is a specific cedar mix, which is designed for pitched roofs. And overall, the proposal is considered to be in a sustainable location in close proximity to a local centre. And any key material considerations would be on neighbour amenity, which would be potentially enclosure to the rear garden, but it is situated to the far end of the garden, away from the properties. Thank you.
Thanks, Phoebe. Members? Oh, no. Got the statements on me first. Right. Sarah, can you read out the statement from the objector first, please?
I moved into 22 Mere Way over 13 years ago when both my neighbours were council tenants of their properties. 24 Mere Way subsequently bought their property. I love the fact that any future building near my property was limited as the electric substation is at the bottom. The proposed dwelling will overshadow approximately 40% of my garden. I have a large strawberry patch in the part of the garden that will be most affected by this build. I had intended to plant more vegetables in this part of the garden. I intend to remove the trampoline, which was kindly given to me by my neighbours at 24 Mere Way, as my grandson doesn't use it anymore. In paragraph 8.71 of the officer's report, it states, there is a small degree of harm arising from location of proposed development in proximity to neighbouring gardens in respect to overbearing impact and loss of light. I dispute the fact of a new property outweighs the harm in this instance. I'm also concerned about the noise levels from the proposed dwelling affecting my life and future occupants of my property. Paragraph 16 of the conditions to be imposed if the application is approved mentions the window on the northeast elevation should be obscure and fixed shut or opening of a maximum of 45 degrees. I do not think this window is necessary and should never be allowed to open and be obscure as it overlooks my garden. I object to the planning application as it will affect the enjoyment of my garden and view from my dwelling. I also believe the proposed dwelling will affect the value of my property in future sale. I believe the current owners of 24 Mearway have no intention to commission the building of the proposed development and intend to move house within the next 6 months. That's it, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. And the statement by the objector, Dean Taylor, sorry, the applicant, Dean Taylor.
Thank you for taking the time to hear my application. As there's been an objection to my application, it's now in front of yourselves for your consideration. I believe the Planning Department has done an excellent job in highlighting and addressing the concerns raised by the sole objection within the proposed document in front of you today. The Planning Department's suggestion is to approve the application. I hope upon your careful review of the information presented that the committee's opinion is also the same. Now, I don't have much to add in terms of an argument for the application, as I believe the proposal documents cover everything pretty well, though I have added my opinion on the matter to the bottom of this letter, and if time allows, it can be read out loud or available for you to look over. There's also something else I'd like to mention. I'd like to bring to your attention the difficulties that the new net gain rules have presented with this application. Although I'm not a builder myself, I feel they are going to have a significant impact on small builders and self-builders and negatively impact small-scale development output in Cambridge moving forward. During the planning process, we hit a sticking point when it came to achieving the biodiversity net gain of 10%. Most of the options available, even when used in combination with each other, don't allow for enough of an uplift over baseline results to achieve the minimum gain required. One option available that I looked into is to purchase off-site credits. Those looking to build homes such as this on small sites like small developers just don't have the thousands of pounds required to purchase these credits to help them achieve a net gain like large developers do, which means this really isn't a viable option for them. In my opinion, the credit system also defeats the whole idea of it in the first place. If the gains are not realised within the confines of the site and actually benefiting and contributing to the biodiversity of the local area, what's the point? Those developers that do have the money to just purchase credits are actually paying for the gains to be achieved normally somewhere entirely different in the country. The local community is in reality actually taking what I perceive to be a net loss on the immediate biodiversity of the area. Cambridge is a very desirable location. We should be making every effort to realise any gains that can be achieved are actually realised in the local area and benefit Cambridge and its residents. We originally managed to gain the required uplift with the introduction of a tree to the site, but I was later told that this wasn't allowed. This meant that the only viable option to achieve the gain was to opt for a biodiverse green roof system. With this, the proposed site achieves a 59% gain over baseline metrics, far exceeding the minimum required of 10%. Now, it's all well and good achieving the gain, but it also shouldn't be at the detriment to the design of the build. Most biodiverse green roofs are flat, which can detract from the overall aesthetic appearance of a property, making them feel somewhat blocky, squash and out of place with their surroundings. These roofs are also nearly always out of view from the street, which is a shame as some look very nice indeed, but no one sees the actual visual benefits. After some research, we opted for a biodiverse pitched roof system. This allows for the build to not only keep the overall aesthetic appearance that a pitched roof lends to a property, but enhances it further. The incorporated wildflower, one in full bloom, I believe will further enhance the overall appearance of the property and the street scene of the surrounding area. I believe that in approving this application, it will also help those struggling to achieve net gains with their application see that a biodiverse green roof is an attractive and viable option and one that should seriously be given consideration. To summarise, the proposed application in front of you is for an attractive yet unobtrusive bungalow. They are a desirable property, yet in very short supply in Cambridge. It's sympathetic in terms of its design and size to the surrounding properties, while also acting to cleverly enhance the street scene for the neighbouring properties on Brackley Close. This is all achieved while also significantly increasing the biodiversity of the site. Sorry, Chair.
Right, okay, that's that then. So any more questions, members? Councillor Pora.
Thank you very much. First, it's good to see it's got an accessible disabled toilet there, so hopefully it might even be aspiring towards M43 as well as M42. The cycle parking is obviously slightly less convenient than the car parking. Could Phoebe just confirm, I think, is there going to be a wall or can you just get to the cycle parking off the street? But I do understand probably why it is that way around, because I think to put the cycle parking nearer the house would have meant extending the bricks into the garden place, so I understand that. It's really interesting to hear what Sarah read out about the sedum roof, because I've never seen a sloping one. So I suppose I'd be interested in the comments as to how viable that is. Although it does sound like the applicant is quite committed to that. And can I ask that condition 5 explicitly makes reference to it, because as per the previous application, it tends to talk about trees and shrubs, and obviously this isn't trees and shrubs, but this is critical to the BNG. And I do, we've raised at various committees, share the concerns about the new BNG rules for smaller properties, because it doesn't give a huge amount of value to amenity grassland or trees, and it is have these bizarre solutions where you're either forced to do it off-site and pay for that, which means you can't afford trees in your own garden, or you have to do something like this. I would really welcome for Phoebe and Toby if we could keep track of how this sloping one goes, if the applicant is willing, not as a planning condition, but because actually if this is successful, we need to know. But equally, if it's not successful, I think there's a good bit of learning we can take from that. So I'd be grateful if that could be taken back to the applicant. Could I also just confirm which house was the objector living in? Because they mentioned getting a trampoline from one house, but I thought that was the house they said they were in. So I was just trying to work out which windows they were referring to. So obviously, if Phoebe could just come back and address the issues raised by the objector, particularly about the overlooking. And they were talking about planting strawberries in the garden as if they were building over the garden, but I'm assuming they meant that it was something to do with the light overshadowing it. So I was just a little confused. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. A lot of the points I would have said there, you've said them already. Anyone else? Okay, the only thing I'll add then is I presume it's safe to build right next to the electricity substation, it being effectively an electromagnetic field around it, and obviously houses haven't been built originally around it. The other things Councillor Poore has said already, I think the objector is at 22, by the way, which is the next one along. Okay, I'll leave it to you, Phoebe, to answer those.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the green roof, there is a specific condition, condition 10, which is purely for the green roof. So it's not included within the other landscaping on the site. The company is, it is a mix that is purely designed for a pitched roof. So it's the viability of it, I mean, I've not seen it in person as a pitched roof, so, but it is a company that has designed a mix that is for that pitch of roof and that scale of the pitch. So it is something that we can keep an eye on during the build process. The neighbour who was speaking in objection is the adjoining house, number 22, I believe. So it's the adjoining house to the terrace property to the north of the site. So I think they are referring to the building overshadowing the rear portion of their garden. The eaves height for the property is 2.6 metres and its pitches up to a height of 3.9 metres at the ridge, but it is sloping away from the boundary of the site and the eaves are kept relatively low. The cycle parking isn't accessible directly from the road, so the existing boundary wall of number 24 on Brackley Close is a existing brick wall that's about 1.8 metres in height. They are removing the portion directly in front of the house and to allow for visibility displays, but there isn't, to retain that, well, the security for both of the gardens, they are retaining as much of the brick wall as possible, which is why there is a side gate directly, sort of where the visibility display of the car park in spaces, there is access to the cycle parking that way, and then there is a direct route into the house from the rear garden as well. So in that sense, to retain the continuity of the brick wall, in this case, officers consider it's an acceptable location for the cycle parking. In regards to building next to a substation, Environmental Health have been notified and they've not raised any concerns regarding noise impacts, and there is nothing that is preventing dwellings from building adjacent to substations. Thank you.
Any more? So just to be clear then, the neighbour 22 is north. They're going to lose their afternoon south-facing sun in that part of the garden. They'll get morning sun and afternoon sun on their strawberries potentially, and the rest of the garden. But it is a loss to that neighbour, significant loss for their garden, but not for their habitable rooms in terms of planning, of course. So any more for any more? Nope. Okay, recommendation then please, Toby.
Thanks, Chair. So the recommendation is set out on page 141 of the officer report. That is to approve subject to the planning conditions as set out with minor amendments to the conditions as drafted delegated to officers.
So recommendation approval. Is in favour of that recommendation?
That's unanimous, Chair, in favour.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to the statements submitters. We've got one more item now, that's the appeals report. So we've got Charlene Harper to present this. I don't know if she's online. Or... No. Okay, Toby.
I would ordinarily take the item, Chair. There's nothing of particular importance that I can see on this as part of these particular papers. Whilst I've got the floor, Chair, it'd be useful just to kind of remind members that well, this is the last City Committee of the year. In the new year, we've got planned a special committee for the Beehive application, which, if you haven't clocked it, is tabled to be heard. I think it's on the 12th of February, just before half term. There will be landing in your diaries shortly some briefing sessions in early to mid-January, both for the Beehive, which will be an officer-led briefing, but there will also be a briefing from RELPEN and their agents in respect of emerging proposals for the Cambridge Retail Park, and we're going to try and dovetail those briefings together so they're all in one. I would encourage members, if they can, to attend both of those briefings as they're significant proposals. Thank you.
Will they be public briefings?
So, Chair, through you, the Beehive briefing will be an officer-led, so it won't be a public meeting. The CRP part of the meeting will be available for any members of the public to attend, as the developers will be there.
So I was going to say, any questions on the appeals report, but anything else as well? So Councillor Porter.
Thanks, Toby. For the Beehive one, can you consult on dates? Just because, again, it's a really important one for us to all get to if we can. So my selfish preference is a Wednesday, because that's purely when people on planning committee don't tend to have their day jobs. And in terms of the appeal, I was just looking through the Clayton Hotel one. Didn't we approve that, or is that a previous one they've appealed? That's one of the appeals.
I think that's a previous one that we refused on daylighting issues.
So has that not been? They're still putting it in, even though we.
So it looks like they've pursued that. Anyway, there was a subsequent application that had a reduced volume that came through committee that we approved. But I think what's gone to appeal is a slightly larger application that did have some impacts on the residential properties that front onto Great Northern Road.
Okay, thanks. And I see that the Varsity Hotel have lodged an appeal. So is there any timeline on that at all, Toby? That's on page 1.
So that will be, I don't know what the timeline will be, but I imagine that's a written reps appeal. So I'll keep members updated. Officers are also speaking informally to the Varsity about another variation to a scheme on the rooftop, so watch this space.
All right, thanks. Any more? Okay, in that case then, have a good seasonal break. See you again at next planning committee in the new year. And I know some of us are still working on other things anyway, leading up to it, but have a good break. Thank you very much, and a shorter meeting today, so that's good, isn't it? So thank you.